have all these clients I teach about having a specific account to capture wealth, and they don't seem to be doing it. I said, Alan, what am I missing? I said, Wade, it's the order of operations. They literally need to put it in a savings account first. Shift the direct deposit to a savings account. Call it a wealth capture clearing account, a place where we can think about our transaction for a minute, clear it through our thought process, through the vision for our future that we have as an individual or as a couple. Capture it first in your own savings account, because savings is defined as delayed spending. It's still meant to be spent, just not today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Thrive and Achieve with your host, Dr. Matt Markel. Thrive and Achieve is the only podcast where professionals help professionals to succeed in career and wealth. Now, here's your host, Dr. Matt Markel.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Thrive and Achieve, where professionals help professionals thrive in their career and achieve financial success. Today, I am super excited to introduce Wade Reed. I met Wade in the early summer. He and I are both in a mastermind group, and we clicked right away. I've been on his show talking about the Anti-Preneur program, and he was one of the very first people I thought of when I created Thrive and Achieve. He is as sharp as a tack, and he has at his very core this desire to help others, which I love. So what does he do? Wade helps people build true wealth. His expertise is in coaching families and small businesses all over the country to clean up and to elevate their professional, personal, and business finances. What he's done is he's saved hundreds of thousands of dollars for these clients, which results in fiscal clarity, confidence, and their peace of mind, which is so very important. Here's some stats. Over the past 20 years, now I was amazed when Wade told me this because he's very, very humble. But when he told me this, I was like, oh my gosh. Over the past 20 years, he's worked with over 1,000 clients, helping them free up a combined total over $8.3 million per year in cash flow. Wade, welcome to Thrive and Achieve.
Dr. Matt, thank you for having me on today.
I've been looking forward to this all week. So tell me a little bit about your professional journey. Wade, what got you to where you are today?
That's a great question, and I love to share the story because I'm a deeply spiritual person. So from a very early age, I could never really answer the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? I just wanted to be a good person. Like, honestly, that's all I cared about at the core, was to be a good person. I had a strong belief in my religious convictions and wanted to be able to share the good word about God and Jesus Christ. And so I had that in my heart my whole first couple of decades of life. And I'm looking at options for, what do I want to do for my career? What schooling path do I want to go on as I started my undergraduate degree? And I was headed toward physical therapy. Honestly, I really loved the body. I loved physical working out. I loved sports. And I had a rehabilitation on a knee. I had an ACL reconstruction and I had physical therapy on that. I thought it was fascinating how these guys could understand the body so well about what muscles needed to be moved in what way to help rehab that right knee of mine and the quad and the hamstring and all the surrounding tissues and all that. I thought, that's something I might be able to go down and do that path. So I was on that path when this whisper comes to me, Matt, take a personal finance class. And it was relentless. It would just keep coming back to me, take a personal finance class. And to give some context to this was 2004. I was married in 2003. So this was about a year later. And it just kept coming back. And I thought, I suppose that's probably a good idea as a young married couple to take a personal finance class. I had some elective credits. I had some space on my calendar. My wife happened to have some space on her calendar. So we found a class to take. And it just shocked me how few people in that class knew hardly a thing about money. And I was one of the few who knew something about it, but I certainly wasn't an expert at that stage 20 years ago. A little over 20 years ago now. And it was just like, I had a lawn business when I was growing up. I had a paper out when I was growing up. So I knew a little bit about money management. I had this little box that my parents had given me. If you can imagine like a cardboard box with 3 slots in the lid, and one said save, one said spend, one said give. And my parents had always taught me the importance of having some different purposes for my money. This is really interesting, Matt. When I was a young boy, I was also in the Boy Scout program.
I was too.
And yeah. It was a really cool thing. And we had merit badges that we earned, and there were certain required components, certain required merit badges to achieve different ranks. And one of the ones that I needed to do that was brand new at the time, it had just changed when I was coming of age, and we had to have this family. It was something related to the family, and there was a component related to budgeting.
Hmm.
I'm like, as a young teenager, learning about budgeting, setting some goals for a couple of weeks and tracking my spending for a couple of weeks and my earnings and seeing if I could achieve that goal. That's rare, I learned later on. As a ninth grader, Matt, I had a class in high school that was an elective that was about personal finance. And we opened up checkbooks and learned how to track our deposits and withdrawals from the checking account on the ledger, and how to write a check and how to do things securely so you don't end up having fraud on that. Like a little bit about mutual funds and a little bit about insurances. And I was like, looking back over this youth, and I'm like, that wasn't normal. That was not normal. Matt, and I'm curious, was any of that normal for you? Stuff I'm just
So,
describing?
so, for me, I actually had a couple things. I had they may have revamped the merit badge between when I went through the program and we went through the program, but it was originally called something like personal finance or something like that. And it was one of the required ones, I believe, to become Eagle Scout. So I remember taking that, and that was very much on the budgeting and so forth. And I remember this obviously before computers were really
Yeah.
home computers were there. I have this sheet of like these different columns and so forth that I was putting things in, and it wasn't like gap, accounting or anything like that, or
Certainly
even like
not. No, not
double entry, but
sophisticated.
it was just enough to basically teach the principles of it,
Uh-huh.
and so that was one area where I was exposed. The other thing was in seventh grade, we actually had as part of our seventh grade math class, we had a lesson on which we did over like several months on the stock market, and we tracked stocks and looked at how much what they were up and what they were down. I actually picked a stock, McDonald's stock, because I was like, this is a consumer good that everybody should be. I didn't really know about didn't quite look at the PE ratio when I chose it. I chose it because of like familiarity with the brand that I knew. But I remember asking my parents after, should we buy some McDonald's stock? And then I don't know, they didn't actually buy me any stock at that point, but they bought me stock and other stuff later. But so I actually had a little bit of that exposure when I was a child. But I don't. But you're right, Wade. I don't think it's normal, or at least it's not something that many people, if they do have it, that they it really resonates with them at that age.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right. Even if it's there, it's not often resonating well because, and here's what I've learned over 20 years. It only matters when it matters. So if you're in high school and you're learning about a mortgage, what in the world does a 16, 17, 18-year-old care about a mortgage? That's not even relevant to them, but maybe a loan on a car. They might be thinking about a car. They might be thinking about a bicycle, or when I was a kid, I snowboarded. So like getting a pass to the local ski resort, like how do I save for that? And how do I, take some of my savings and earn more on it? And that's what kind of caught my interest as a teenager. I had a mutual fund my parents had set up when I was quite young, and I learned about it in my mid-teens. And I took an interest in that probably because of having had that class as a freshman, that later on I was like, oh, this is what a mutual fund is. I read the prospectus. I was that nerdy at 17. I read the prospectus,
That's
and
pretty
it
rare.
had,
Like
yeah,
I don't think very many people today, regardless of age, read the prospectus on a mutual fund.
I think you're dead on. Like today, I wouldn't want to read a prospectus, but then it was like so curious to me. I just read it. And what I found was this mutual fund had been around since the early to mid 80s, and it was now the mid 90s. It had a pretty significant track record of about 11% on average a year. So I'm like, oh, 11%. How about I take some of my own money that I was earning from this uh, lawn business that I had, and I put it in there. And as I said, I have this religious aspect to my life. I was planning to do a 2-year full-time mission for my church. And so at 19 years old, I did that after I graduated high school. About a year later or so, I went on this mission, and I had dropped $5,000. There was $2,500 in there from my parents that had grown from whatever they put in, and I added $5,000 to it. And I'm like, set it and forget it. This thing's going to grow 11% a year. I'll come back with close to 10,000. I'll be able to get a Jeep or maybe help get into my college or whatever. And little did I know while I was away, because I was gone from 2001 to 2000, I guess it was late 2000 to late 2002. And can you remember what happened during that time frame in
There,
2001?
well, yeah, it was 9/11, which is kind of basically
11.
reset everything related to the public
Yeah.
equities market. So
I had no clue that something like that could have an impact on my money. No clue. But every single page of that prospectus, so what do you think was written at the bottom?
there's probably a disclaimer or warning that says, like, past returns, past performance is no guarantee of future
Bingo.
returns, right?
Exactly right. Like, well, past performance has done 11% for something like 20 years. Maybe it was 10 years or whatever, but fact. I learned that factually. Past performance is not an indicator of future performance. There are things outside of our control. There are risk factors outside of our control. So if you can imagine, I'm sitting in this class as a now a 20-something-year-old, married for a year, learning about this, doing that stock picking thing and tracking a portfolio. And after the fact going, now I understand what risk really is. I understand that mutual funds are not me choosing the stocks. It's somebody else choosing the stocks based on a specific parameter of choices that they have to stay within legally bindingly. They can't change but every so often. And so they can't pivot during a crisis like that and change their business model. They had committed to a specific way of investing. And because of that, I have no influence over it other than when I buy and when I sell. And so anyone listening to this, you're in the exact same boat as I was in my late teens to early 20s. You're now in your 20s, 30s, 50s, maybe even 60s or so listening to this going, the stock market has ups and downs and ups and downs. And guys, really only when it matters, this is again 20 years of actual personal experience speaking, and I've worked with people from 19 up to 85 years old and heard their perspective on life. It's been a brilliant career so far to hear such perspective on the stages of life. And I hear people go as they prepare for retirement, well, I don't know if I can keep taking on risk. And I'm like, you're exactly right. And the portfolio structure has to change. You have to move from mostly equities to a mix of equities and bonds or something similar that we would call a certainty asset. Bonds are intended to be a tool that helps create certainty that offsets risk. But in today's market, even they don't have the inverse correlation they used to the stock market. And so there are other assets we have to look at, things like our own business, things like our own skill set that we can, I love the Anti-Preneur methodology here because you recognize as a professional, you have the ability to improve your skill set and then sell it for a higher price at a different company or offer some additional value to your same company and increase your earnings. By far and away, the highest and best investment will always be you. Own ability to create an income is by far and away the highest and best investment. And more than a rate of return in the savings account, the stock market, real estate, or a business, just keeping more of what you're making, keeping more of it. The volume of dollars that you keep is by far more important than the earning rate on the money. So when we talk about having something in equities, sure, a portion of our portfolio can be there. But when it really comes down to it, the volume of dollars you're setting aside, yes, enjoying your lifestyle, but having sufficient amount being set aside matters the most when it comes to financial success long-term.
especially if you're looking at this from the long game standpoint, right? If you're starting in your 20s, an extra little bit, almost a de minimis amount, but you put in an extra little bit
Sure,
now, by the time you're in your 40s or
sure.
50s or 60s, it's going to be huge.
Yeah.
I remember a few times, actually more than a few times, people have come up to me once they knew that I was doing this Anti-Preneur thing and it had a significant financial aspect to it. They're like, "Hey, Dr. Matt, I've got $1,000. What should I invest that in?" And almost always the I'd say Bitcoin. No, I'm just kidding. I'd say I'd say invest that in you. If you take $1,000, let's say you're making, I don't know, pick a number, like let's say you're making $100,000 a year, right? And you take that $1,000 and you invest that in you, some training, some course, some maybe a networking thing, a mastermind group, whatever. Take that $1,000 invested in you, and let's say that leads to, over a few years, a 20% increase in your pay. Well, now that
Mhm.
$1,000 to 20% increase to make it to 120 grand, that's that's a 20 to 1
20
multiple on
times
that. Yeah, 20 times return, and not just once, every year
every
after that,
year.
because you make 100, at least until you retire or quit or whatever. So it's amazing how investing in yourself it can pay such huge dividends. But we get stingy on that. I see so many people that won't. They'll blow 10 grand on a vacation, but they won't spend $3,000 or $5,000 investing in themselves for something that will pay returns, long beyond the real relaxation of that vacation diminishes.
So I guess back to finish the story, this conversation we've been having kind of in the midst of this origin story, so to speak, is what lit the fire under me. As a young married man, as a mid-20s at this point, trying to figure out life and decide what the career was going to be, I just knew from that point forward being in personal finance was the path. Personal finance, because there are so many things that hinge on successful financial management. And one of those in particular that's really undergirding everything I do is the fact that a lot of marriages, still at least 50%, and in the 70s it was 80% claimed this, but today a little over 50% claim that it's financial problems that break up marriages, that break up committed relationships. Financial problems break up relationships. And I'm a big believer in, and you see above my head, if you're watching the video version of this, I've got a family of 6 children. I've been married 22 years now, same woman. And my wife wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And she said, listen, if we're going to get married, you just have to know I have some very strong convictions as to what I want to be in a married relationship. I want us to have, number one, a shared vision. Number two, I want you to know part of my vision is to have 6 children. Part of my vision is to continue my education at some point, because she got a bachelor's degree, but eventually wants to get a master's. And she's been a stay-at-home mom was her 4th thing. She wanted to be a stay-at-home mom until she raised her kids, when she might go back and continue her education. And because I was totally in alignment with that, and I was just in love with this woman, I said, you know what, I think we can do that, and we'll figure that out together. So that shared vision has kept us together. And I'll say this, money problems have been there. There have been many money problems, but what I have found, Matt, and I imagine you have as well, is our ability to communicate on important topics to us is what gets us through that. Whether it's our career paths, whether it's the house we want to live in, the location in the country we want to live or in the world, the trips we want to take, all of those things have to do with financial decision making. It's the resource allocation and our ability to communicate about that really unifies us and allows us to live a life that we love, that we are in love with, excited about, that gets us, wanting to jump out of bed every day because we have the resources we need. We're managing them well. We're what we call a good steward or manager over those resources, and thereby we can do whatever we want, whenever we want. And that's freedom. We don't have to have tens of millions of dollars to be free, Matt. It's really how we manage the money. And that's what I found over 20 years of conversing. 20,000 conversations about money over this past 2 decades has told me money management is huge. So that's the backstory. Sorry that took quite a while to get to there, but that's why I'm here doing what we do.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. The concept of defining what success is. So for you, it's this aspect of freedom, this aspect of being a good steward of your finances, having a wonderful wife who I've met, and she is fantastic, and 6 great kids. Defining what success is keeps us from defaulting to an accomplishment-based definition, which will never be enough. Because if your definition of success is accomplishment-based, let's say it's like, I want to have $1 million. I want to have $1 million to my name, or have a net worth of $1 million, or 2 million, or I want to have a job where I make, 100 grand a year, or $250,000 a year, or $500,000 a year, or whatever those are, or have a business that makes $1 million top line, or $5 million top line, or whatever the numbers are. But if they're accomplishment-based, as soon as you hit it, actually, when you're even just on the path to hit it, you'll be switching into what's the next one? $1 million a year ARR? We can do 2. Can we do 2 in 18 months? Yeah, I think so. So, and you'll always be chasing that, right? As opposed to thinking about what is the life you want to live. And that is what success is to you.
Yeah. And Matt, we need to talk about that for a second, because money will never, ever be satisfying. Ever. A certain dollar amount is not satisfying. It's an
It's
ever
an
elusive thing.
accomplishment. It's an accomplishment.
It's a
Yeah.
momentary blip in time when our bank account hits a certain dollar amount or our paycheck receives a certain dollar amount on the pay stub. It's not what creates the fulfillment. It's what you did along the way, who you became along the way, who became worthy of receiving that receipt for the value that you've created in society. That's where the satisfaction comes from of the success. The money is a receipt, proof that you've become worthy. You're the type of person who can accomplish things, keep your commitments, solve problems in a big enough way to achieve those returns. That's what it is. The money is, there's 5 areas of wealth, and money affects the 4 others that are actually the biggies. So money or finance is number 1 as a tool to help us accomplish the other 4. So the other 4, physical, our physical well-being, how well we take care of our bodies. People will achieve wealth and then they'll give up all their wealth to get back their health, right? So physical. Mental, our intellectual pursuits, how we're developing our mind, the things that we're learning and always seeking progressive knowledge. Our spiritual life, the connected way we are to nature, to God, the sense of connection we have with other people, having a sense of compassion and love and service and an appreciation for our fellow man and our community. And then that's the social piece as well. They're all kind of interrelated. So physical, mental, spiritual, social, the relationships we have, both intimate in our love relationships, family, as well as outside of that, in our colleague relationships and community relationships and church relationships. I have found I have a very, very large family. My mom was one of 7. My dad was one of 6. And so on either side of my family, I have about 40 to 50 cousins. My grandparents were prolific progenitors. And when my grandparents died in their early 90s, there was over 200 descendants, over 200. And you know what my grandma said shortly before she died? It wasn't, I'm so grateful for all this money. They didn't have a lot. She said, I'm so grateful I have people around me who love me, who will care for me as I age and as I prepare to pass.
Wow. Wow. That's
It's not money.
amazing Weed. Okay. So theme of the show, thrive in your career, achieve financial success. When you think about thriving and achieving, I think I know what your answer is going to be. Thriving and achieving. What does that look like in your life right now?
Yeah. So thriving and achieving, certainly there's some business benchmarks I'm looking for, some dollar benchmarks. There are a certain number of people I want to reach. I've got a book that I am releasing in about a month. From the time of this recording, that is. So it'll be December 12th. We're launching a book called True Wealth, Replacing Financial Fear and Worry with Confidence and Capability. And when I say true wealth, I'm talking about those 5 areas of wealth: the financial piece, physical, mental, spiritual, and social. Those are the 5 components of true wealth that I talk about. And I talk about very practical aspects to how to manage money. I have a system. So part of my success in thriving is getting the message of the simplicity of money out there, that it doesn't have to be complex. It can really be as simple as a 4-step process, what I call my awesome money method. And that is an acronym. And the quick story to that is I was just kind of brainstorming one day and I wrote 4 words on my whiteboard. And one of them was organize, another was systemize, another was optimize, and another was maximize. And my son walks by and he's like, hey, Dad, did you notice that says awesome vertically, O-S-O-M? And I'm like, son, brilliant. Thank you. You are awesome. And I recognized that over my career, as I looked at all the common components of what people did successfully, number 1, they got financially organized, because there's this thing I call the money fog that's happening. No matter what the income, it seems like there's confusion, there's worry, there's fear that I'm not managing my money well. I don't know where it's going. And I had hundreds of clients who were small business owners making several $100,000 a year, take-home pay from their multi-$100,000 a year or low millions out of their businesses. And they always felt a sense of anxiety. They were always reaching for tax savings. They were reaching for debt reduction. They were reaching for rate of return. And I found that if they stayed disorganized, none of those things mattered much, because they didn't really know what was happening. So step number one is organize. So thriving and achieving for me is helping people like you and our listeners to get out of the money fog, to get to a point of absolute clarity and confidence by getting financially organized, number one. Building a system for managing cash flow. That's the second part. And that system looks like, which accounts do we put it in first? And I'm going to give you a little takeaway. So anyone listening, this is perhaps the biggest takeaway of my 20 years is the order of how we receive our income. Matt, do you remember there was a day when people received cash for their day's wages?
It was
Physical cash?
It was before my time. I'm not that much older than you, but yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember stories of it. Yeah, it's
And as youth though, right? When I
yeah.
did lawns, I received cash. I'm
Oh,
sure when
true.
you did service in your neighborhood, you
Yeah,
probably received cash.
right.
That was the most common and simplest way to get paid. People would get their cash. They knew exactly how much they had. They would put it into different envelopes and they would know this is for my rent payment or my house payment. This is for my groceries. This is for, and they would do their budget or their spending plan based on physical cash. It was really easy. And then checking accounts came online and people could write paper checks. And they had a ledger that said, this was my beginning balance. Okay, I just spent this much, subtract that off, spent this much, subtract that off, added this much from a new deposit from whatever cash I had to the bank. Now here's my new balance, subtract, add, subtract, add. Really simple still, because it was just like having cash, except it was in a bank account and they were just transacting on checks. And then debit cards came along and you could still basically do the same thing, but then something changed. Credit, easy credit cards and swiping credit cards, and then delaying the timeline of our spending. So we would buy today and pay it 30 days later, 45 days later when the credit card bill came due. And people started to lose touch with what their money actually was for. They started to get lazy about it. It became too easy to spend on credit. And so when I get to the system, what I find is most people don't receive cash anymore. They receive a direct deposit. And where do they typically put it, Matt?
It goes in their checking account.
Checking. And what does a checking account represent?
We probably want to contrast that with a savings account where we think about the saving towards some sort of goal, whether that's investing or vacation or whatever. But checking account has this aspect of fluidity and expendability, I would say.
Bingo. That's exactly it. It's spending money. If it's in our checking account, it's available to spend. It's like money we have in our pocket. When we received cash, we'd put it in the envelopes, and then anything that we didn't need for later was in the front pocket so we could go spend it. That's the checking account. It's like your front pocket in your pants. Well, I found for many years I was teaching people would receive their direct deposit to their checking account and then they would automatically move it to a savings account. But it was weird. People wouldn't do it. Even automatically, they would maybe do it, but then they'd pull it back in. And people were not actually saving the 10% that I recommend. 10 to 20 is the minimum threshold I like my clients to be at. And if you're not quite there, if you start at 1% or 5%, whatever it is, you need to have this automatically happening. Everyone, I'm sure, listening to this has heard, you need to pay yourself first. Am I right, Matt? You've heard that 100 times. Pay yourself first. But nobody actually does it because they pay everyone else first by putting it in their checking account. So I'm about almost a decade into my training and I'm sitting down with a mentor of mine, Matt, and I said, something's wrong with the flow of money. I have all these clients I teach about having a specific account to capture wealth and they don't seem to be doing it. His name was Alan. I said, Alan, what am I missing? I said, Wade, it's the order of operations. They literally need to put it in a savings account first. Shift the direct deposit to a savings account. Call it a wealth capture clearing account, a place where we can think about our transaction for a minute, clear it through our thought process, through the vision for our future that we have as an individual or as a couple. Capture it first in your own savings account because savings is defined as delayed spending. Still meant to be spent, just not today. So literally, he said, put it all in your savings account because then it tells your brain, I earned this. This is my receipt. I actually get to receive it all first. And then I'm going to deliberately choose what level of internet service and what finishes in my house and what type of car that I'm going to drive and what type of dinner I want to go out and have, what type of clothes I want to wear based on the priorities that I have in my life. The order of cash flow matters.
That seems like such a simple thing, but
Yeah.
I can easily see how it makes just such a big mental shift to where you are paying yourself first and then you decide what are the other things that you want to deal with. Otherwise it seems like it's funny money and just like I don't know where it is and I can't afford to save because I've got all these things. Ooh, Starbucks, whatever it is that you'll find a way to, what was the phrase from a long time ago? The money's going to burn a hole in your pocket.
Yeah, exactly true.
Stay with us. We'll be right back to Thrive and Achieve. If you're looking for more information about how to help W-2 employees, check out the Amazon #1 bestseller, Anti-Preneur. It's available on Kindle and now in paperback. Now back to the show.
So we are talking with Wade Reed. Wade is a fantastic financial coach and the author of the book that's going to be coming out soon, True Wealth: Replacing Financial Fear and Worry with Confidence and Capability. So Wade, you were going over the awesome method, which is organize, systemize, optimize, and maximize. Maximize, is that the
right.
last step?
That's
Okay.
right.
So we got to the first two. Let's quickly go through the optimize
Okay.
and maximize.
So I'm going to make one more comment about systemize and why this matters. It's such a simple thing, but I have some colleagues who've been doing this as well, completely without me knowing them. They'd been tracking this exact same type of system. And they said that they had data showing over 10 years that clients who would adopt this, take all their salary into their savings and then make a new salary, quote unquote, for themselves to go to their checking. That was their spending plan, basically their average spending. He said, we tracked this and our clients would go from 5% a year savings to 30% a year savings over just a couple of years. 30% of their take-home pay automatically being saved by this one adjustment to the flow of money. And the reason for that, if we keep our lifestyle about the same by sending only the same amount out of the savings into our checking, and we know that that's what's available to spend, all the raises that we get, the bonuses that we get, the gift money that comes in from our family, the sale of a vehicle, whatever it is, all that surplus stays in the savings account. Okay, and this is what moves us into optimization. Now that we are saving first, we are starting to optimize our cash flow. Optimization is getting efficient. So our organization is about confidence and clarity. The system is about ease. The optimization is about efficiency. So we start to look at all the other aspects. What do the insurances look like? Do I have the right amount of insurance, the right type of insurance? Am I getting the biggest bang for my buck? And I just went through this. I had an insurance company I was with for probably a decade, and I thought they were the best company in the state of Utah where I live. And I finally started looking around seriously because I felt like they were charging me way more than I needed to be charged. And so I looked at a variety of different companies, and I found one where I was able to reduce my costs by close to 50%. Not
Wow.
just the 15 that most of the commercials tell you, but almost 50 through a couple of adjustments to how we, and I still have the max insurance I can get. I don't go lean and state minimums. I get the maximum I can get. And at that maximum, I'm still saving. I didn't cut corners. I kept my deductibles at modest levels to be as efficient as I could. So that's one of the things you can do is on your insurance is shop around. Look at your deductibles. Maybe you take a little bit higher deductible and thereby get a lower price, or we use that difference to get more coverage for the same dollars. That's efficiency. We look at our debt structure. This is a big one, Matt. When everyone that I talk to who has a debt asks me the order of operations, I say, do I save? Do I put money in retirement in my investment vehicles? Or do I put money toward debt? I said, well, let's just look at what you have. So we get part of that organization phase is to get clear on what the balances look like in bank accounts, investment accounts, and what amounts are going and where. And one of those things is to look at the debt and look at the type of debt it is. Is it credit card? Is it auto loan? Is it home? Is it school? Is it, in a few cases, a payday loan? Is it a healthcare situation? There's lots of different types of debts that I've seen over the years. And I found a system I call the cash flow index. So in order to optimize our debt repayment, a lot of people do what's called a debt snowball. And that's generally by taking the smallest balance first making minimum payments to all of our loans except for that one, and then paying the lowest balance off first, and then taking the money we were putting toward that one and put it toward the next till it's paid off, and toward the next till it's paid off. And that's a great system. The most efficient technically is looking at your interest rates and paying the highest interest rate off first. But sometimes it's such a high balance that we don't make enough progress quickly enough, so we lose track of it. We get frustrated. Although that's technically the most efficient, it's not the most effective. So what I found is this kind of hybrid where we look at the cash flow index, and this is a measure of what's the balance owed divided by the payment that we're making. And it gives us a number. And I talk about this in my book as well. And anyone who's listening, there's a wait list for the book that's available, and I'll give you a free chapter that talks about this specific system in optimization. So when we pay down debt, we find the lowest cash flow index number. And it generally is closely tied to the lowest balance, but not always. And it takes interest rate as a secondary component. We just look at which loan frees up the most cash flow the fastest. So if I have a $20,000 car loan and it's a 5% loan and its payment's $500 a month, and I have a $20,000 student loan and its interest rates say 8%, but I only have to pay $100 a month toward it, the same $20,000 frees up $100 a month versus $500 a month. That's what the cash flow index helps measure.
So what's the
Which one
equation again?
frees up
It's
the most cash flow.
it's
It's the
what's the
balance
equation for
you owe
okay.
divided by the payment. Really simple.
Okay.
So if you're wondering about how do I pay off my debt the fastest, and my preferred method is the cash flow index because it frees up the most cash flow the fastest. And then again, if you're using the system I've taught you, all that cash flow no longer has to go to the checking account. It stays in the wealth capture clearing account, or WCA, that savings account. And then here's another little trick I'll suggest to you guys. In order to have more control over your money, rather than making small extra payments on all these debts, concentrate on just one. But even before you concentrate extra payments, I prefer to save it all up in that wealth capture clearing account, again, WCA. And when I have a big enough lump sum, I'll pay off the debt in full. And then I get the immediate psychological win. The debt's paid off and the cash flow's freed up instead of doing it over months and months and months. Small chunks and losing control over my money, because control is a big deal. I'm going to give you one more acronym today. I call it CLUE, C-L-U-E. We want to have lots of control over our money, maintain high amounts of liquidity or accessibility. We want to have the U as uses, which is another word for options with our money. And then the E part is emotion. Money is such an emotional thing. It's one of the core principles about money. It's highly emotional. So when we have high control, high liquidity, lots of options, we are generally in a high positive emotional state. And when you're paying off debt, the emotional state is usually feeling a little bit negative. But if I make an extra payment, that's like a little psychological win, I feel better. If I keep it in the savings account and that wealth capture account, I see my account balance growing. So I start to shift the psychological win to saving and then deliberately choosing when to pay off the debt.
So Wade, the next step is maximize in the awesome plan, OSOM plan, maximize. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this is my favorite piece, because once we've accomplished the first three, those are basically the permission slip to start playing, to start really growing your wealth. So maximize is about turning all that surplus cash flow. Remember, as you're paying off debt, cash flow is getting freed up with every debt you've paid off. It's automatically staying in that wealth capture account. As it accumulates there, the natural tendency will be to start asking the question, what do I do with it? Where else do I put this money besides my regular bank account that's paying me next to nothing? And this is where interest rate does start to have an impact. So I said earlier in our conversation that the volume of dollars you're saving matters the most. I stand behind that. And as we start to have mental space, because we've handled organization, we've handled a system, we've optimized our financial situation, now we've got surplus cash building and building and building. We have to learn to turn that cash into a compounding growth machine that's building the value by itself. It's earning on its own accord. So that's what interest does for us. It's like sending our employees to go out and work on our behalf and accomplish more on their own than we can through our own earnings. So the first and most important safe place to continue storing our money is maybe you look at a CD at a local bank, maybe you look at a bond, maybe you look at a municipal bond. And if you listeners out there haven't heard of this yet, high early cash value whole life insurance. High early cash value whole life insurance. And I was just in a meeting the other day with some of my colleagues. I've been in the financial services industry 20 years now. Most of that has been as a life insurance strategist and an estate planning strategist. And what I've learned about life insurance, particularly whole life, is it's been around almost 300 years. And it is by far the most regulated and most stable place we can store our money outside of the banking system. Banks are kind of faulty. You know, they hold 10% of their cash on deposit. I worked at a bank for 4 years. I know this implicitly. Banks are fractionalizing their reserves. They're taking every dollar they bring in and lending it 9 times. So it creates a really precarious situation if people start calling on it and a bank run happens. So if we want to move it to a safer place that doesn't have to worry about FDIC insurance, but is instead regulated by guarantees, whole life insurance is the place to store it. And why, you might ask? I've heard it's not a very high return. Well, it's not an investment, for one. So we're not comparing it to the stock market. We're not comparing it to your real estate. We're not comparing it to your business. We're just comparing it to an alternative savings account. So over my career, I have found that when we establish a high early cash value life insurance policy, we have the majority of the money we put in immediately available to us, so it's still liquid. Remember CLUE? Control, liquidity, use, and a high positive emotional state. We maintain control, we maintain liquidity, we maintain our options, and because it provides additional protections for us, both for our family, if you're like me and a family man, or you have a spouse and maybe not kids yet, but you have somebody that is kind of depending on you, it's nice to know that if something bad happens, if you die early, there's a recovery of income that you would have earned to the family. That's what the death benefit's for. But it's also there as an asset protection vehicle. So as you continue to test the waters and maximize, and you start to seek out investments like perhaps a rental property, perhaps stock market investment, Bitcoin, these things all have risk and varying levels of risk. And if you happen to lose some money, the death benefit that comes along with your whole life insurance will recover that loss at your death, guaranteed. This is not term life that has a temporary time frame of 5, 10, 15, 20, or sometimes 30 years, and then it goes away. This is for your whole life. So it's an asset protection vehicle. And so as we start to put this together, I often call it the family bank strategy. And mostly, like, I'm a family man, so I use that term. Some people call it the personal banking strategy or infinite banking strategy. It's all kind of the same thing, using these high early cash value policies. So we take money out of that wealth capture account that's accumulating, and we shift it from a bank account to whole life insurance. And then as it accumulates there and we have good, sound investment opportunities, we borrow against the value of that policy, keeping all the money that's in there growing at net 5%, which is gross 6.5 to 9, depending on your tax bracket. So it's an investment-like return on a gross rate of return. It's still all growing. So we keep it growing, we borrow against it, we go make another investment in some interesting thing that you've vetted out really well, and then we get the earning rate there as well. And that starts to create this compounding effect on our assets, Matt. If we can keep our corpus of money, that savings portion, growing at the same time we utilize it for other investments. See, when it's in a bank account, it's either in the bank or it's in some other investment. It's either in the bank or in a paid off car. It's in the bank or it's in the stock market. It's an either or transaction. But when we have a whole life insurance set up properly for high cash value, it's an and transaction. It's in the policy, protecting us, growing tax-free, accessible to us tax-free, and it can be in other investments at the same time. So we get the efficiency factor of optimization of where we're storing our money, and we get the growth factors that we're starting to look for in Maximize.
And the interest that you pay on that is usually pretty, because when you do, as I understand that when you do a withdrawal, there's an interest that you're charged on that, but that's a pretty modest fee. And from some of the things I've seen, is like you should be able to do substantially better than that.
Exactly.
So you can almost use it as like to arbitrage the money in it.
That's exactly right. Yep. There is a legitimate interest that's charged because we're borrowing against it. Think of it like a residence and a home equity line of credit. the value of the home stays intact and its market value continues to increase despite having a loan against it, right? The loan has no impact on its market value. But if we do get a line of credit against our home, there is an interest rate charged, but we don't qualify it from a tax perspective as a withdrawal or a sale, and thereby it's not taxable to us. So the interest of, say, 5% compared to a possible 22 to 37% tax, there's an arbitrage first and foremost there. And the second arbitrage where we get efficiency is by investing in something that's a sound investment that's a higher rate than we could get in the policy itself. Again, it's a gross return of 6.5 to 9, depending on your tax bracket, netting out 5. So in your other investment, you have to think about that. What's my gross return? What are my costs to acquire this investment? What are the carrying costs for it? What are the potential risks of losing it? And what's my net return after tax? A lot of people don't calculate that. That's a skill set, guys. If you're listening to this and you've never really calculated your gross return minus fees, minus taxes to get to your net return, we're not getting the whole picture. We're not seeing the whole thing, because you might hear you can get 8 to 12% in the stock market. That's your gross return before any fees internal to the mutual fund costs or front end or back end loads on sales of stocks. Sometimes those are the case, or management fees on your portfolio if you're having it professionally managed for you. And then, of course, the tax costs when you sell. Most people overlook that and they don't compare that properly. So that's why I always give you a gross return on the whole life, because a lot of people hear it's a 5% and they think, well, that's not much. Well, its gross return is very comparable to any other investment, but it's no risk. So yeah, there's an interest rate, but you're growing at a higher rate than it's costing you, especially if you choose a sound investment outside of that can grow substantially more.
Excellent. And I like the idea of thinking about it. It's like, this is not to compete with your more speculative investments. This is a way to think about this as like a savings account, which has an alternative savings account, which has some additional features and additional things that you can use on it.
Yeah, this is our liquid fund before we make those investments. Think of it. Okay, I'm going to give you one more visual, guys. If you can imagine with me an equilateral triangle with the point at the top like a pyramid. The base is wide and stable. The top is really narrow. So if you turn that pyramid on top, it's really precarious. It can fall easily. A lot of people have most of their money in the top portion. Think of 4 different levels or sections. The bottom section is this cash, liquid, safe asset. This is where bank accounts, CDs, and whole life insurance cash value sits. The next tier up are real estate assets you might own directly, like your own home or rental property. Maybe you have a business. That's directly controlled by you. Somewhere between 20 and 80% of our assets are stored, a lot of us, in that type of asset base, especially if you're a business owner. So 20 to 40% you might have in the base tier. Another 20 to 80% is in the next section up. The next section up is much narrower, if you can imagine. And that's where we're looking for passive income, multifamily real estate deals, oil and gas deals, or some other business venture that you're not directly in control over. And so when we start to shift our money from the base section up to these next sections, it had dang well better have a high probability of coming back with more, because the risk profile on that is substantially higher. And I've seen hundreds and hundreds of people I've worked with who have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars by not being scrupulous about their investment choices. And they complain about a 2 to 5% return on their safe money, and then they go speculate on it and they lose it all. Well, what's worse, 2 to 5% or losing it all?
Yeah, I think a lot of people become enamored with the potential of higher returns and put far too much in the speculative portion of their portfolio, which is
really top heavy.
Yeah, it's gambling. It is really gambling. I mean, what was Buffett's quote? One of Buffett's many quotes is like, "Don't lose money."
Rule number 1, don't lose money. Rule number 2, refer back to rule number 1.
Right. So when you think about that, clearly you've laid out a lot of benefits of having the right type of whole life and some very smart strategies with that. For somebody who's let's say in their 30s, is there a formula you like to use to say, like, this is how much you should put into a policy like this?
It's mostly geared around capacity. So we're looking at somewhere between 10 and 15% of your annual savings. By this point, if you've got your systems in place like I've outlined, and you've got your wealth capture account in place, the savings account that's gathering all your money and any surplus from paying off debts, and let's say you're withholding money going to a 401k because of the stock market risks that are there and the lack of liquidity that's there. Most of my clients, as they start to recognize what those qualified plans actually do and the restrictions that are there and the future compounding tax cost that's there, you delay your tax today. It's not actually tax savings, it's a delay of tax. And you might have only paid 22% today, but 20 years from now, the hope is you'll be in a lower tax bracket. But I find that those who are proactive in their life are actually at higher earning rates in their careers and higher tax brackets, and they're forced to take money out on a taxable basis in the future at least the same, if not higher tax brackets than when they were spending it today into those accounts. So what I'm finding is people in their 30s are like, man, I got to start saving. Well, where do I save it first? Well, number one, I need an emergency fund. So I need a couple months worth of my living expenses at home in a bank. And then I want to start putting my money into whole life insurance and get the rest of my safe money there and build an opportunity fund. So honestly, in people's 30s, depending on their earning rate, I typically see somewhere between $5,000 and $30,000 a year. People in their 40s are often doing $20,000 to $50,000 a year. People in their 50s are often doing $20,000 to $100,000 a year. And some people, of course, who have a higher capacity for savings are putting more than that. But the beautiful thing about whole life is it's not government restricted. It acts a lot like a Roth IRA, but you're not restricted to $6,000 a year contribution. You can put whatever you're capable of in there, and it's private. There's no government interactions. There's no wait till 59 and a half. There's no 5-year wait period on a Roth IRA to take it out without being taxed on the gains. It's a much simpler asset.
Yeah, not a lot of the rules of like a 7T or anything like that where you're locked in for many years.
Yep.
But you're funding it with post-tax dollars, right?
Post-tax dollars. Yep. So we pay tax today when we know exactly what the rates will be, and we grow it tax-free from that point forward. I have many clients in their 30s who look at their funding strategies and they're like, it's basically a 10x. By the time you're ready to retire, you'll have about 10x what you put in available. If you're in your 40s, you'll have about 5 times. If you're in your 50s, you'll have about 2 to 3 times what you put in by the time you're ready to retire. So
Awesome.
This is the volume of dollars play that I talked about earlier. We need to get volume of dollars set aside. And if we can earn on it as well, that's a bonus. But it's the volume that matters most.
Yeah, a lot of really, really wise strategies there. And what I love about this is baked into all of these are the tax consequences. I've said on this show, I've said on other shows that I've personally been on myself, that that not being smart about your taxes can turn a great investment to a mediocre or poor one, right? Because taxes are such a big deal. You think about if you mess up something like 6-7% on taxes, well, if you're getting 12% on a return, that's a pretty solid return. It's some are better, but a lot more are not going to give you that. But if you mess up 5 or 6% of it, now you're back at like 5% or something like that. So your big winner at 12% is now it's something that's basically just going to be keeping up with inflation. So really being smart on the taxes there's one takeaway on all this is like, absolutely make sure everyone talks to their financial advisor on all the deals that they're doing to optimize the taxes.
I want to speak to that for just a minute, because we often hear from CPAs and other investment advisors to defer our tax so that future we can get that tax savings when we are taking it out, which isn't always the case. In fact, many cases it's not. Here's the other thing about it. Anything you invest in inside your qualified plan, again, qualified as a 401k and IRA, if you're investing, especially in pre-tax dollars, in stocks and mutual funds, if it's outside of the qualified plan in a stock and mutual fund and you hold it for longer than a year, you get special tax treatment called capital gains rates, which are typically 0 to 20%. If it's inside the qualified plan and it hasn't been taxed yet, any gains are going to be taxed at whatever your tax bracket is. There's no special tax treatment on it. There's no capital gain tax treatment. It's considered ordinary income tax on any gains. So there's a lot of people out there who may start to do a special thing called self-directing. and they'll take a portion of their money and they'll move it into an IRA known as a self-directed IRA, and then they'll start to choose private investments like real estate. But there's very strong restrictions. You can't invest in real estate that you have direct ownership of. It has to be somebody else's investment deal. And you can't buy the beach house and go enjoy it. So you lose personal use of any assets you buy, and gains of the real estate are at ordinary income tax, not capital gains rates, and you're not allowed to take depreciation, and you're not allowed to take expense deductions. So all these otherwise really positive tax benefits that come from private ownership of real estate and other investments are gone when we do those things inside qualified plans. And I think that's exactly what you're trying to say, is understanding the tax ramifications of these decisions is a big deal. I think tax is perhaps the biggest expense we will ever incur, aside from our own stupid tax and making bad investments.
Right. Which we try to minimize, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's absolutely. And so being smart on what you do with a self-directed, you could do self-directed on the, on the pre-tax, like the 401k, you could do self-directed on the self-directed Roth. So there's a whole bunch of different options. My advice, I'll see if you agree with this, Wade, is that like, there's several options. Be smart. Talk to someone who is an expert at this, not just somebody who like, well, I heard a friend who had a cousin who did this one
Yeah,
thing.
for sure.
Get a real, I like to use the phrase, find a Sherpa. Find a Sherpa who can guide you along the way,
Yeah.
and then have a financial professional and they may work with a tax person and really, really lean in hard on them. Because yeah, you're right. So even if you do the recaptured depreciation, that's at a different rate and that's deferred for multiple years if you think of a real estate deal. So
Exactly.
so doing the right thing. But there are some things where doing it in a Roth, a self-directed Roth, may be giving you some
can be.
diversification, or as well as some potential for some different returns. So lots of options. Be smart in what you do, and get the advice of others, really, because you can, again, it's so easy to mess up something on the taxes, and now you've taken a great investment and turned it into a poor one. Okay, I want to get us near the end here. I want to go through a couple of rapid fire questions like we do with all of our guests on here. What is one piece of career or financial advice, common advice, that you think is completely wrong?
Let's see, common career advice. Stick with the same employer your whole career.
So that's wrong, you
I
think?
think that's wrong. In today's market, if you're loyal to a company, you don't get truly rewarded for that in most cases. Shifting from one company to another back to the same company, if you really like the company you're working with before, you'll get much higher raises. A 20% increase going to another company, a 50% increase going to another company versus sticking it out in one specific company the whole time. So be willing and open to consider alternative employers over your career, to gain new skills, new culture, and bring that back to another employer if you really liked working for them early on.
I could not agree more, because I think that, but with a twist, I think that view everything with your employer like you're a professional baseball player. So you play like heck for the team that you're on right now,
Yes.
right? You give it your everything, because you're going to hope that they make it to the World Series. So you're going to give everything you can for them. But in the future, it may be your decision to no longer play for that team. It may be someone else's decision for you to not play for that team, in which case you go play for another team and you'll work like heck for them. So you're loyal while you're there. You're 100% loyal while you're there, but realize that at the end of the day, it is a business, just like a pro team. It may not be the best thing for you to stay there. It may not be the best thing for them to have you stay there. So realize that that's just the nature of the game. So great advice. Okay, last one, pay it forward. If you could teach every professional just one lesson on money, what would that be?
Volume of savings matters most. Not interest rate, not rate of return, but the volume of money we keep that we're earning.
Fantastic. I love it. I'm a big Richest Man in Babylon fan, and pay yourself first, right? That's the biggest one of the biggest takeaways from that. Lots of great advice in there. Okay. Wade, this has been fantastic. You've given us a ton of useful advice and a lot to think about. How can we get in touch with you?
Yeah, you'll find me all over the socials, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. You can search me by name or by Money Mastery Coaching is my company name, and you'll find me there. Again, my book is launching December 12th. We've got it in pre-launch phase right now. You can jump on, look up True Wealth or moneymasterycoaching.com/true-wealth-book, and you should be able to get on that wait list. I've got some freebies for you there, that specific chapter on the cash flow index and how to manage your debt. I've got a freebie called my Money Mastery Prep Kit, which is about getting organized and the way we gather our financial documents, how to label them for make them easy to find. And then I'm going to do a live 30 to 60 minute conversation with anyone who's on that wait list prior to the launch, and we'll discuss real world practical financial tips during that call. So really love to being on your show. I'm grateful that anyone listening could grab a copy of the book and have in writing everything we've been talking about here so you can refer back to it.
I'm going to go sign up on the list as soon as we're done with this taping. Wade, thank you so much for all this super valuable advice.
You're welcome.
Okay, everybody, we will see you next time on Thrive and Achieve, where professionals help professionals thrive in their career and achieve financial success. Have a great day, everybody.